In the heart of a bustling city, there stood a grand hotel known for its shimmering chandeliers, luxurious carpets, and an atmosphere that whispered elegance. It was the kind of place where people dressed their best and carried themselves with purpose. Among these polished guests walked Alexander Hartley, a man whose name was synonymous with success. He was a billionaire who had built his empire from scratch, navigating through challenges most couldn't even imagine. Yet, despite his wealth and power, Alex wasn't someone who paid much attention to others. His world revolved around deals, deadlines, and decisions. But one evening, something unusual happened. As Alex strolled down the hallway after wrapping up yet another exhausting meeting, he noticed something, or rather someone, that stopped him in his tracks. There, sitting on the floor against the wall, was a young woman wearing a maid's uniform. Her knees were pulled close to her chest, and she held a phone tightly to her ear. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke in hushed tones, her voice trembling with emotion. Alex slowed his pace, unsure why he felt drawn to this moment. Normally, he wouldn't have given it a second thought. People cried all the time, life was hard, and everyone had problems. But there was something about this scene that tugged at him. Maybe it was the way her shoulders shook with quiet sobs, or how her fingers gripped the phone like it was her only lifeline. Whatever it was, Alex found himself lingering nearby, pretending to check messages on his phone while secretly listening. From what he could overhear, her words painted a picture of desperation. "I don't know what to do," she whispered into the phone, her voice breaking. "They're going to take everything." She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end, then added, "I'm trying, but it's not enough." Her pain was palpable, raw, and unfiltered. For a fleeting moment, Alex felt a pang of familiarity. Years ago, before he became the towering figure he was today, he too had faced moments when life seemed impossible. Back then, no one had offered him a helping hand. He'd clawed his way out of hardship alone. But now, standing here, in this opulent hallway, watching this young woman struggle, he wondered if he should intervene. He hesitated, torn between two instincts: walk away and mind his own business, or step forward and offer assistance. The rational part of him argued that getting involved was unnecessary. After all, what could he possibly do? This wasn't his problem. But another part of him, the part buried beneath layers of ambition and detachment, urged him to act. Something about her vulnerability stirred memories he'd long suppressed, reminding him of the humanity he sometimes forgot existed. Taking a deep breath, Alex finally decided to approach her. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and cleared his throat softly to get her attention. Startled, the young woman looked up, her eyes wide with surprise, and perhaps a hint of fear. Her name tag caught the light, revealing the name Elena. "Are you okay?" Alex asked gently, his tone softer than usual. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a neatly folded handkerchief, offering it to her. Elena hesitated for a moment before accepting it, dabbing at her tears awkwardly. "I'm fine," she murmured, though her red-rimmed eyes told a different story. Alex crouched down slightly so they were closer in height, making himself less intimidating. "You don't seem fine," he said honestly. "Do you want to talk about it?" For a brief moment, Elena considered refusing. Who was this stranger dressed in expensive clothes asking such personal questions? But there was sincerity in his gaze, a genuine curiosity that made her pause. Slowly, haltingly, she began to open up. She explained that she worked multiple jobs to support her younger siblings after losing their parents unexpectedly. Between medical bills, school fees, and keeping a roof over their heads, she was drowning in responsibilities. Now, the bank was threatening to foreclose on their family home, and she didn't know how to stop it. Each word she spoke carried the weight of her struggles, painting a vivid picture of a life hanging by a thread. As she talked, Alex listened intently. He didn't interrupt or offer empty platitudes. Instead, he let her pour out her frustrations, nodding occasionally to show he understood. When she finally fell silent, exhausted from speaking, Alex leaned back slightly, processing everything she'd shared. After a few moments, He asked a simple question. Do you want to change your life? Elena blinked, caught off guard by the abruptness of his query. Change her life? Of course she did. Who wouldn't? But how could someone like her, stuck in a cycle of endless work and worry, ever hope to escape? Seeing the uncertainty in her expression, Alex pressed on. If I told you there's a way out, if I told you there's a chance to turn things around, would you take it? Elena stared at him, unsure whether to believe him or dismiss him as some eccentric rich guy playing hero. But something in his demeanor convinced her to trust him just a little. With a hesitant nod, she agreed. Satisfied, Alex handed her his business card. Meet me in the lobby tomorrow morning, he instructed. We'll figure this out together. And with that, he stood up, straightened his suit and walked away, leaving Elena clutching the card and wondering if this chance encounter might truly be the beginning of something new. The next morning, the young maid arrived at the hotel lobby feeling a mix of emotions, hope, fear, and a pinch of disbelief. She wasn't used to stepping into situations like this. Life had taught her to expect disappointment more often than not, but something about the billionaire's calm yet determined demeanor gave her a sliver of hope. Still, she couldn't shake the nagging thought that maybe it was all too good to be true. She walked into the lobby wearing her best outfit, a simple blouse paired with a modest skirt. It wasn't much, but it was clean and ironed to perfection. Her hair was neatly tied back, and though she tried to look confident, her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the card he'd given her the night before. The hotel around her buzzed with activity, guests sipping coffee, businessmen in sharp suits discussing deals, and staff moving briskly about their duties. Elena felt out of place, like a small fish swimming in an ocean meant for sharks. She spotted him almost immediately. He stood near the lounge area, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that screamed authority. His posture was relaxed, but there was an air of focus about him, as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders yet managed to stay composed. When he saw her approach, he gave a slight nod, gesturing for her to follow him into a quieter corner of the hotel. They settled into plush chairs in a private lounge, away from the noise and prying eyes. A waiter appeared moments later, setting down 2 cups of steaming tea. Alex thanked him quietly before turning his attention back to Elena. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched just long enough to make her nervous, but then he leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. So, he began, his voice steady and calm. Let's talk about what we can do. Elena swallowed hard, unsure where to start. She hadn't expected things to move so quickly. Part of her wanted to believe this was real, that someone like him could genuinely care about someone like her. But another part, the cautious, battle-worn part, kept whispering warnings in her ear. What did he want from her? Was this some kind of charity? Or worse, was there a catch she hadn't considered? Alex seemed to sense her hesitation. He didn't rush her or demand answers. Instead, he offered a reassuring smile, one that softened the intensity of his gaze. I know this must feel overwhelming, he said, but I don't make promises I can't keep. If you're willing to trust me, I'll show you a way forward. Her heart skipped a beat. Trust him? That was easier said than done. Yet, there was something about the way he spoke, honest, direct, and without any hint of superiority, that made her consider it. Slowly she nodded, signaling for him to continue. He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Right now, my assistant is retiring after decades of service. I need someone reliable, someone who understands hard work and isn't afraid to take on challenges. You might not think you're qualified, but let me tell you something. You've already proven your strength. Anyone who can juggle multiple jobs while taking care of their family has resilience most people lack. Elena blinked, stunned by his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. In fact, most people dismissed her as just another faceless worker, someone whose struggles were invisible and unimportant. Hearing him acknowledge her efforts felt surreal, almost like a dream. I'm offering you a chance to step into a new role, he continued. You'll start as my personal assistant. It won't be easy. I'll push you hard, and you'll have to learn quickly. But I'll also teach you everything I know. Business skills, financial management, leadership, It's all within reach if you're willing to put in the effort. Her mind raced as she processed what he was saying. Personal assistant? To someone like him? It sounded impossible, like a fairy tale come to life. But Alex wasn't finished yet, and there's more, he added, his tone firm but kind. I'll help stabilize your family's situation. The house, the bills, all of it. We'll find a solution together. This isn't charity, he emphasized, anticipating her skepticism. It's an investment. In you. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of gratitude, of relief, of sheer disbelief that someone would offer her such an opportunity. She wanted to ask questions, to clarify every detail, but words failed her. All she could manage was a shaky nod. Good, Alex said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied expression. Then we'll start tomorrow. Come prepared to work. And remember, you're not alone anymore. As they parted ways, Elena couldn't stop replaying the conversation in her mind. Was this really happening? Could her life actually change because of a chance meeting in a hotel hallway? Doubts lingered, of course, they always did. But for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel a spark of optimism. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she thought about the road ahead. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But for the first time, she felt like she had a fighting chance. Someone believed in her, even when she struggled to believe in herself. And that belief, however fragile, was enough to light a fire inside her, a fire that promised brighter days were waiting just beyond the horizon. The first day on the job was nothing like Elena had imagined. Stepping into the Billionaire's world felt like walking onto a movie set where everyone moved with precision and purpose, speaking in terms she barely understood. Gone were the familiar surroundings of hotel hallways and cleaning carts. Instead, she found herself surrounded by sleek desks, buzzing phones, and walls lined with framed certificates and awards. The air smelled faintly of leather and polished wood, a stark contrast to the disinfectant scent she was used to. Alex wasted no time getting her up to speed. He handed her a stack of papers thicker than any book she'd ever read, and told her to go through them before their first meeting of the day. This is your crash course, he said, his tone firm but not unkind. You'll need to understand the basics if you're going to keep up. Elena stared at the pile, feeling overwhelmed already. She wasn't stupid, far from it. But this was a whole new language. Words like quarterly projections, ROI, and stakeholder engagement might as well have been written in another language. Still, she nodded, determined not to let him down. If he believed in her, then she owed it to both of them to try. She spent hours poring over the documents, highlighting key points and scribbling notes in the margins. Every now and then, Alex would glance over, watching her struggle without saying a word. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to criticize, but to guide. Focus on the big picture first, he advised. Don't get bogged down in the details right away. Once you see how everything connects, the rest will make sense. His words helped, though only a little. The learning curve was steep, and mistakes were inevitable. On her second day, she accidentally sent an email meant for Alex to one of his top investors. The subject line alone made her cringe. Draft notes. Confidential. Her heart sank as she realized what she'd done. Surely this was the end. How could someone so careless possibly work for a man like him? To her surprise, Alex didn't explode in anger. Instead, he called her into his office, closed the door, and gave her a measured look. Mistakes happen, he said simply. What matters is how you handle them. Did you apologize? She nodded, still trembling. Yes, I emailed him immediately and explained it was an error. Good, Alex replied. Now let's talk about how to avoid this in the future. He walked her through setting up proper filters and double-checking recipients before hitting send. It was a small lesson, but it stuck with her. Mistakes weren't failures. They were opportunities to learn. As the days turned into weeks, Elena began to adapt. Slowly but surely, she started picking up the rhythm of the job. She learned how to prioritize tasks, manage schedules, and draft emails that sounded professional rather than awkward. At first, she relied heavily on Alex's guidance, asking questions whenever she felt lost. But over time, she grew more confident, trusting her instincts and taking initiative when needed. What amazed her most was how much Alex invested in her growth. He didn't just hand her assignments and expect perfection. He took the time to explain why things mattered and how they fit into the bigger picture. During meetings, he encouraged her to sit in and listen, even when she didn't fully grasp what was being discussed. Afterward, he'd debrief her, breaking down complex concepts until they clicked. "You're doing better than you think," he told her one evening as they wrapped up a particularly grueling day. "Most people would have given up by now, but you keep pushing forward. That takes guts." His praise meant more to her than she cared to admit. Growing up, she'd rarely received encouragement. People noticed her only when she messed up or fell short. Hearing Alex acknowledge her efforts filled a void she hadn't realized existed. For the first time in her life, she felt valued, not for what she could do, but for who she was. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments when self-doubt crept in, whispering that she didn't belong in this world of power suits and boardrooms. Some of Alex's colleagues looked at her sideways, clearly skeptical of her presence. One executive even commented under his breath that she seemed out of her depth. The remark stung, but instead of letting it crush her, she used it as fuel. If they doubted her, she'd prove them wrong. Alex noticed her determination and quietly supported her. When others questioned her capabilities, he stood firmly behind her, reminding them, and sometimes even her, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. His faith in her became a shield against the negativity she encountered. Over time, Elena discovered strengths she never knew she had. She was resourceful, quick-thinking, and fiercely loyal. These qualities earned her respect from those who initially doubted her. Even the skeptical executive softened after witnessing her handle a crisis with poise and efficiency. A client had canceled a major deal last minute, throwing the entire team into chaos. While everyone scrambled to regroup, Elena stayed calm, suggesting alternative solutions that ultimately salvaged the situation. "That was impressive," Alex said later, a hint of pride in his voice. "You handled that better than I would have." Her cheeks flushed at the compliment, but inside she glowed. This wasn't just a job anymore, it was a chance to redefine herself, to build a future she once thought impossible. And while the road ahead was still long, she no longer feared it. With each challenge she faced, she grew stronger, more capable, and more certain of her place in this new world. Through it all, her relationship with Alex deepened. What began as a professional partnership evolved into something akin to friendship. He shared stories of his own struggles, revealing a side of himself she hadn't expected. Beneath the polished exterior was a man who understood hardship and loss, someone who had clawed his way to the top without losing sight of his humanity. Their conversations became less formal, filled with laughter and mutual respect. By the end of her third month, Elena realized something profound. She wasn't just working for Alex, she was learning from him. Not just about business, but about resilience, integrity, and the power of believing in someone. And in return, she hoped she was teaching him something too. That true success isn't measured by wealth or titles, but by the lives we touch along the way. Months had passed since Elena first stepped into the Billionaire's world, and though she'd come a long way, life still found ways to test her. Just when she thought she was finally settling into her role, a storm hit, one that would shake not only Alex's empire but also the fragile foundation of trust and growth they'd built together. It started with whispers. At first, Elena didn't pay much attention to the hushed conversations in the office hallways or the tense expressions on people's faces during meetings. She assumed it was just another challenging week, the kind businesses often faced. But as days went by, the tension grew thicker, almost suffocating. Phones rang nonstop, emails flooded in, and the once calm atmosphere turned chaotic. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. One afternoon, Alex called an emergency meeting. The room was packed with executives, their faces pale and drawn. Elena sat quietly at the edge of the table, notebook in hand, trying to make sense of the situation. When Alex walked in, his usual composed demeanor was replaced by something darker, worry etched into every line of his face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady but heavy, "I won't sugarcoat this. One of our largest investments has collapsed under allegations of fraud. This isn't just a financial setback, it's a reputational crisis. People are watching us closely, and if we don't act fast, everything we've built could crumble." The words landed like a punch to the gut. Elena felt her stomach drop. She knew how hard Alex had worked to build his empire, how many sleepless nights he'd endured to get where he was today. To see it all teetering on the brink of disaster was heartbreaking. For the first time, she saw vulnerability in him, a crack in the armor of the man who always seemed invincible. As the meeting progressed, panic spread among the team. Some argued for drastic measures, while others suggested cutting losses and retreating. It was clear no one knew exactly what to do. Amid the chaos, Elena noticed something. Alex kept glancing at her, almost as if seeking reassurance. She wasn't sure why. He was the leader after all. But it gave her an unexpected surge of courage. When the meeting ended, Alex asked her to stay behind. Once everyone left, he sank into his chair, rubbing his temples with a weary sigh. "This is bad," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Worse than anything I've faced before. I don't know if I can fix this." Elena froze. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined hearing those words from him. Alex, the man who always had answers, who thrived under pressure, was admitting defeat. It was surreal, almost frightening. But instead of letting fear take over, she took a deep breath and spoke up. "You can't give up now," she said firmly, surprising even herself. "You didn't bring me here just to watch you fall apart. You taught me to fight, to push through when things feel impossible. So let's figure this out together." Her words hung in the air, bold and unshakable. Alex looked at her, his eyes wide with surprise. Then, slowly, a small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Together, huh?" he repeated, his voice tinged with gratitude. "All right then, let's get to work." And so they did. Over the next few weeks, Elena became Alex's right hand, working tirelessly to salvage what remained of his business. She pored over documents, analyzed data, and reached out to key stakeholders, doing whatever it took to keep the ship afloat. Her resourcefulness shone brighter than ever. When banks threatened to pull funding, she negotiated extensions. When clients wavered, she assured them of the company's stability. And when media outlets painted a grim picture, she crafted statements that emphasized transparency and accountability. Through it all, Alex watched her with growing admiration. He'd hired her to be his assistant, but she had become so much more: a partner, a confidant, someone who stood by him when everyone else faltered. Her loyalty and determination inspired him to dig deeper, to find strength he didn't know he still possessed. Their late-night brainstorming sessions became legendary. Sitting across from each other in his dimly lit office, surrounded by stacks of papers and empty coffee cups, they hashed out strategies and debated solutions. There were moments of frustration, of course, times when exhaustion clouded their judgment or tempers flared, but they always came back to the same goal: survival. One evening, as they reviewed a particularly tricky proposal, Alex leaned back in his chair and studied her thoughtfully. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "when I offered you this job, I never imagined it would turn out like this. I thought I was helping you change your life. What I didn't realize was that you'd end up saving mine." Elena blushed, unsure how to respond. "I'm just doing my part," she mumbled, avoiding his gaze. "No," he countered gently. "You're doing more than that. You remind me of why I started this journey in the first place. Not for money or power, but to create something meaningful. Somewhere along the way I lost sight of that, but you bring it back." His words struck a chord deep within her. For years, she'd struggled to see her own worth, convinced that her life amounted to little more than survival. Yet here was Alex, a man who had everything, telling her that she mattered, that she made a difference. It was humbling, overwhelming, and beautiful all at once. As the crisis unfolded, their bond deepened. They relied on each other not just professionally but emotionally. In quieter moments, they shared stories of their pasts, opening up about fears and dreams they'd kept hidden for years. Alex spoke of the loneliness that came with success, of feeling like an outsider even among those closest to him. Elena confessed her guilt over not being able to save her parents, her constant fear of failing her siblings. These conversations brought them closer, transforming their relationship into something neither had anticipated. It wasn't romantic, not yet anyway. But there was undeniable chemistry, a connection that transcended roles and titles. They understood each other in a way no one else could, bound by shared struggles and mutual respect. Slowly, but surely, their efforts began to pay off. Clients returned, investors regained confidence, and the media narrative shifted from doom to resilience. The road to recovery was long and arduous, but with each small victory, hope reignited. By the time the dust settled, Alex's business had not only survived but emerged stronger than before. Looking back, Elena realized that the crisis had changed her in ways she couldn't have predicted. She wasn't the same timid maid who'd cried in a hotel hallway months ago. She was stronger, braver, and more capable than she'd ever imagined. And Alex? He was different too, softer, more grounded, and deeply grateful for the woman who had stood by him when the world seemed against him. As they celebrated the company's resurgence with a quiet dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the glittering city skyline, Alex raised his glass in a toast. To second chances, he said, his eyes locking onto hers, and to the person who reminded me what really matters. Elena smiled, raising her glass in return. To new beginnings, she replied softly, her heart swelling with gratitude and possibility. In that moment, surrounded by lights and laughter, they both knew their lives had been forever altered, not by wealth or power, but by the simple act of believing in each other. The aftermath of the crisis brought a sense of calm that neither Alex nor Elena had experienced in months. The storm had passed, leaving behind lessons and scars, but also growth. Both of them were different people now, shaped by the trials they'd endured together. What started as a professional partnership had evolved into something deeper, something neither of them fully understood yet, but couldn't ignore. For Alex, the experience had been humbling. He'd spent years building his empire, convinced that success was measured solely by numbers and achievements. But watching Elena navigate the chaos with grace and grit made him realize how much he'd lost sight of what truly mattered: connection, purpose, and humanity. In her, he saw qualities he admired, qualities he wished he could reclaim for himself. She reminded him of the man he used to be before wealth hardened him, before isolation became his default state. Elena, on the other hand, felt like she was finally stepping into her own skin. For so long, she'd defined herself by her struggles, believing she was destined to live paycheck to paycheck while carrying the weight of her family's burdens. But working alongside Alex and seeing firsthand what determination and resilience could achieve had awakened something inside her. She no longer saw herself as just a maid or an assistant. She was capable, intelligent, and worthy of every opportunity life threw her way. Their dynamics shifted subtly after the crisis. Conversations grew more personal, laughter came easier, and there was an unspoken understanding between them that went beyond words. One evening, as they sat in Alex's office going over reports, Elena noticed him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite place. It wasn't the usual focus or admiration. It was softer, warmer, almost tender. "What?" she asked, smiling nervously. "Do I have ink on my face or something?" Alex chuckled, shaking his head. "No, nothing like that." He paused, hesitating, as if debating whether to say what was on his mind. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled deeply. "I've been thinking about us." Elena froze, her pen hovering mid-air. "Us?" she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Alex said, his tone steady but tinged with vulnerability. "You've become such an important part of my life, not just professionally but personally. I don't think I've ever felt this connected to anyone before. And I can't help wondering, do you feel it too? Her heart raced as she processed his words. Of course she felt it. The bond they shared, the mutual respect, the unspoken chemistry. But hearing him put it into words made it real, undeniable. Still, fear crept in. Could someone like him really see her as an equal? Or was this just gratitude talking? She began, struggling to find the right words. I care about you too, Alex, more than I thought possible, but I'm scared. This world you live in, it's so different from mine. I don't want to ruin what we have. Alex reached across the desk, placing a hand over hers. His touch was gentle, reassuring. You won't ruin anything, he said firmly. If anything, you've made everything better. You've shown me that true strength isn't about power or money. It's about courage, empathy, and standing by someone even when things get tough. That's who you are, Elena. And that's why I think I'm falling in love with you. Tears welled up in her eyes as his confession sank in. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, with such honesty and conviction. It wasn't just flattery, it was raw, genuine emotion. For a moment, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this kind of love. I think I'm falling in love with you too, she admitted, her voice trembling. But I need you to promise me one thing, that this isn't charity or pity. I want to stand beside you as an equal, not because you feel sorry for me. Alex nodded, his gaze unwavering. You'll always be my equal, Elena. Not because I say so, but because you've earned it. Every step of the way, you've proven yourself. I wouldn't have made it through the last few months without you. With that, the walls between them crumbled completely. They embraced for the first time, holding on to each other as if afraid to let go. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. They both knew challenges lay ahead, but it was a beginning, one filled with hope and possibility. Over the following weeks, their relationship blossomed. They took things slowly, savoring every moment together. Alex introduced Elena to his world, showing her places she'd only dreamed of visiting. Art galleries, rooftop gardens, and cozy cafes tucked away in quiet corners of the city. In return, Elena invited him into hers, taking him to meet her siblings and sharing pieces of her past that shaped who she was today. Her siblings warmed to Alex quickly, charmed by his kindness and sincerity. At first they were skeptical. How could someone so wealthy and powerful genuinely care about their sister? But as they spent more time together, they saw the truth. Alex loved Elena for who she was, not for what she could offer him. And Elena, in turn, helped Alex reconnect with his own humanity, reminding him of the joy in simple moments and the importance of giving back. Together, they worked to secure a brighter future for Elena's family. Alex helped pay off the remaining debts on their home and set up a trust fund to ensure her siblings' education would never be compromised again. He insisted it wasn't charity. It was an investment in their potential, just as hiring Elena had been. She agreed, knowing deep down that her siblings' success would mean the world to her. As months turned into a year, Elena continued to thrive in her role. With Alex's guidance, she took on bigger responsibilities, eventually earning a promotion to executive assistant. Her confidence soared and she began mentoring others, passing on the lessons she'd learned along the way. Watching her grow into her own person filled Alex with pride. She wasn't just his partner anymore. She was a leader in her own right. One evening, as they strolled along the beach during a rare weekend getaway, Alex stopped suddenly and turned to face her. The sun was setting, casting golden hues across the water, and the air smelled of salt and freedom. Kneeling down on one knee, he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a delicate ring. Elena, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've taught me to love again, not just others, but myself too. Will you marry me and spend the rest of your life showing me how to be the best version of myself? Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, unable to speak. Yes, she whispered finally, throwing her arms around him. 1,000 times yes. In that moment, surrounded by crashing waves and endless skies, they sealed their promise to each other. A promise built on trust, respect, and unconditional love. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step. Together, they had turned pain into purpose, despair into hope, and a chance encounter in a hotel hallway into a lifetime of happiness. Little did they know, their story was just beginning. The wedding was nothing short of magical. It wasn't held in some grand ballroom or extravagant venue, but on a quiet hilltop overlooking the ocean, where the breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and the sound of waves crashing against the shore. Elena wore a simple yet elegant dress, its flowing fabric catching the golden light of the setting sun. Alex stood beside her, looking every bit the proud groom, his eyes never leaving hers as they exchanged vows. Their families were there. Elena's siblings, now older and thriving, sat beaming in the front row, while Alex's closest friends watched with smiles that spoke of shared history and deep respect. The ceremony was intimate, filled with laughter, tears, and heartfelt speeches that celebrated not just their love but the journey that had brought them together. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the applause was warm and genuine, echoing across the hillside like a blessing from the universe itself. But the real magic wasn't in the flowers, the rings, or even the breathtaking view. It was in the way Alex and Elena looked at each other. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only pure joy and gratitude. They had come so far from that fateful night in the hotel hallway, and now, standing hand in hand, they knew their bond was unbreakable. Life after the wedding was a blend of challenges and triumphs, much like any marriage, but theirs was rooted in partnership. Elena continued to grow in her role within Alex's company, eventually becoming one of its youngest executives. Her rise wasn't without obstacles. Some colleagues still whispered about favoritism, but she silenced critics. With her hard work, intelligence, and unwavering dedication, she became known not just as Alex's wife, but as a force to be reckoned with in her own right. Meanwhile, Alex leaned on Elena more than ever, relying on her wisdom and perspective to guide him through tough decisions. Together, they transformed the business, shifting its focus toward sustainable practices and community-driven initiatives. They believed success shouldn't come at the expense of others, and worked tirelessly to create opportunities for those less fortunate. Their efforts earned them recognition not just as entrepreneurs but as philanthropists committed to making a difference. At home, life was equally fulfilling. Elena's siblings had blossomed under their care. The youngest, once shy and withdrawn, now excelled in school and dreamed of becoming an engineer. The eldest took over managing the family home, using skills Elena had taught her to handle finances responsibly. Watching them thrive filled Elena with pride, knowing she'd given them the stability she'd always longed for. Alex, too, found joy in being part of a family again. He'd spent years isolating himself, convinced that vulnerability was weakness. But Elena and her siblings showed him otherwise. Dinner tables were loud and lively, filled with laughter and debates. Birthdays were celebrated with homemade cakes and silly games. Holidays became cherished traditions marked by warmth and togetherness. For the first time in years, Alex felt truly whole. One crisp autumn morning, as they sipped coffee on the balcony of their home, Alex turned to Elena with a thoughtful expression. "Do you remember that day in the hotel hallway?" he asked, his voice soft. Elena smiled, setting down her cup. "How could I forget? You changed my life that day." "I didn't do anything special," Alex replied, shaking his head. "You did all the hard work. I just gave you a chance." "No," Elena said firmly, reaching for his hand. "You gave me more than a chance. You gave me hope when I needed it most. And you kept believing in me even when I doubted myself. That's what made all the difference." They sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on how far they'd come. From a single act of kindness in a lonely hallway to building a life full of purpose and love, their story was proof that sometimes the smallest gestures can lead to the greatest transformations. Later that evening, as they prepared for bed, Elena noticed something tucked beneath her pillow, a small envelope with her name written neatly on the front. Curious, she opened it and pulled out a letter. It was from Alex, To my dearest Elena, I wanted to write this because words often fail me when I try to express how much you mean to me. You've been my rock, my inspiration, and my heart. Because of you, I've learned to see the world differently, not as something to conquer, but as something to cherish. Thank you for reminding me what it means to live fully, to love deeply, and to give freely. Our journey is just beginning, and I can't wait to see where it takes us next. Forever yours, Alex. Tears welled up in Elena's eyes as she read the letter. She turned to find Alex watching her, a sheepish grin on his face. It's corny, I know, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck, but I meant every word. She kissed him softly, holding him close. It's perfect, she whispered. Just like you. Years passed, and their legacy grew. Elena launched her own foundation, dedicated to helping women break free from cycles of poverty and build brighter futures for themselves and their families. Her story inspired countless others, proving that resilience and determination could overcome even the toughest odds. Alex supported her every step of the way, stepping back from the spotlight to let her shine. Together, they raised 2 children who inherited the best traits of both parents: compassion, ambition, and a fierce sense of justice. Family dinners remained noisy and chaotic, filled with stories of school projects, soccer games, and dreams for the future. On weekends, they visited the beach where Alex had proposed, teaching their kids to appreciate the beauty of simplicity and the importance of staying grounded. As they stood together one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Elena rested her head on Alex's shoulder. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that night? She asked quietly. Alex wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. Sometimes, he admitted. But then I remind myself that it doesn't matter. What matters is that we're here now, with each other, with our family, with everything we've built. Life may have thrown us curveballs, but look at us. We're stronger because of them. Elena nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every challenge, every sacrifice, every tear. They had turned hardship into hope, pain into purpose, and a fleeting encounter into a lifetime of love. And as they gazed out at the horizon, hand in hand, they knew their story was far from over. Together they would continue writing it, one chapter at a time.